In just 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you 20 composition techniques that you need to know as a photographer. Once you know all these techniques, you're going to be well on your way to creating photos that are compelling and have impact. Hi, my name is Sean Gallagher. I'm a professional photographer and filmmaker. If you're new to my channel, welcome. For the past 20 years, I've been producing work for clients including National Geographic, The Guardian, and the Pulitzer Center. Here on my channel, I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned throughout my 20-year career to help you improve your own photography. Don't forget to watch to the end of the video where you can learn how you can get my feedback on your photos and how you can join my private photography community online. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 20 different composition techniques that I know will help start improving your photos. These are tried and tested photographic techniques that I use every day as a professional, and I know that they can work for you too. The rule of thirds is one of the most basic composition techniques in photography, but it's also one of the most important. You can visualize it by running 4 lines across the frame, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical. In this image taken with the drone, you can see that the passing motorbike falls on the intersection of the lines created when using the rule of thirds. Use the intersections created by the rule of thirds as a guide for where to place the main subject matter of your photograph. It's a simple but useful way to make your compositions more interesting. Strong lines are a simple and effective way to increase the impact and power of your compositions. Whether those lines are vertical or horizontal, incorporating them into your images will make for much more powerful and interesting compositions for your viewer. In this image, you can see that I incorporated the strong lines created by the thick wires of a bridge over a river. I positioned myself in the center of the bridge, then framed the image so that the lines fell vertically in a strong pattern across the frame. By doing this, it created a strong background and setup for the image I wanted to make. When the 3 men walked into this position, I was able to make a more compelling image utilizing the power of lines. Using leading lines is one of the best ways to start making more compelling images. Using leading lines gives you the power to draw your viewer's attention to something you want them to see within the photograph. Often the leading lines run from the foreground to the background, like in this image of a woman carrying her bike over a set of railway tracks. You can see how the lines lead your eyes through the frame. They add dynamism and a little drama to the photo, drawing your viewer's attention to what you want them to see. Symmetry is a powerful compositional tool that taps into the brain's natural appreciation of form and balance. Symmetry has always been an important part of human history through architecture, art, and our perception of beauty. In photography, we can use this to our advantage. So when you are next out taking images, look for opportunities to use symmetry where one side of the photo balances with the other side. Reflections are a fun way to experiment with this, like in this image I took in China. Patterns are another great way in which you can increase the power of your compositions. They tap into our natural ability to recognize and seek out shapes and objects. In this image I made with a drone of a farm in Cambodia, I immediately saw the repeating shapes of the bushes. I knew that if I framed it tightly, I could use the shapes as a pattern. Using patterns like this helps increase the power of the photograph by tapping into that innate human appreciation of repeating shapes and patterns. Lines are a very powerful way in which you can draw attention to things within your photograph. Strong lines, especially those in a diagonal, can add real drama and impact to a photograph. If you look at this image, you can see that I have the diagonal line of the road cutting from the bottom left corner to the top right. The road is a different color to the earth around it, making the diagonal lines stand out even further. Look for ways in which you can use diagonal lines too, in which to add drama to your photos. A frame in a frame is one of my favorite composition techniques. Essentially, you are using other frames within your photograph to focus the viewer's attention on something that you want them to see. Now, those frames might come in the form of windows or doors, or they may even be something that's found within nature. In this image, I was photographing a story in Jakarta, Indonesia, and was exploring an area that had been damaged by flooding. I was in a damaged house where one of the walls had been destroyed. I decided to use the wall as a frame within a frame to highlight the boys in the background. The secret to using this technique is to find your frame, pick your spot, and then wait for something interesting to walk into your frame. Similar to leading lines, diminishing perspectives gives a sense of real depth to your photograph, and you can lead your viewer through different parts of the frame by using those lines within the photograph to give that diminishing perspective. In this aerial image taken in China, you can see that the diminishing perspective is created by the highway, which snakes and curves into the distance. The highway disappears into the far distance in the top right of the frame, creating a sense of true depth to the coastline scene. Long roads, rivers, paths and bridges are really good for utilizing this technique. Try getting an elevated position, like in this image, as it will really heighten the effect of the diminishing perspective. Utilizing the power of strong shapes is one of the fastest and best ways to start creating more interesting and compelling images. Think circles, squares, rectangles, any other traditional shapes, and think how you might be able to incorporate those shapes into your photographs to make more interesting compositions. In this image, I focused on using the strong circle created by photographing a trampoline from above. You can see that your eye is immediately drawn towards the circle, especially as it's dark in color against the light background. The strong circle also acts as a frame which draws your attention to the children playing on the trampoline. All of this helps use the power of the circle to make a more impactful photo. One of the mistakes that I see many amateur photographers make is that they always shoot photos from eye level. Many of the best photographers, however, will experiment with their perspective and try to get different types of angle, especially low angles. When you go for the low angle, like in this image, you begin to emphasize other elements within the frame. Here you can see that by placing my camera at a low angle in the ditch, compositionally the focus is automatically drawn to the figures in the upper part of the frame. The low angle also emphasizes the lines that are close to the lens, adding even more drama to the shot. So if you want to get more experimental with your compositions, consider changing your angle. Try getting low to mix things up. As well as going for those low angles for your compositions, you could also do the extreme opposite and seek out those higher angles too. This might mean that you need to hold your camera above your head, maybe climb a flight of stairs to get that different perspective, or maybe even use a drone to get an image from the aerial perspective and that really high angle. But all of these can help liven up your compositions and give you a different perspective on your scenes. In this image, I was looking directly down on a beach while using a drone to take photos. This elevated position allows me to play with the lines and patterns on the beach. in this case the fallen trees. I utilize the power of the diagonal line of the tree created in the center, along with the elevated perspective, to create a more powerful and interesting composition. Many images that I see taken by amateur photographers often focus just on one point of interest or one central subject within a frame. But you can take it one step further and try to bring other elements into the frame to make more interesting compositions. In this image, you can see that I have 2 points of interest in the frame: the tree on the left and the man walking towards it on the right. There's a dynamic that is immediately created between these two elements in the frame, drawing your eye between both, and they create a connection and relationship between the two that suggests something deeper for your viewer. Think carefully how you may be able to incorporate two elements into your photos and what it suggests to your viewer about the subject matter. The power of three is a principle within photography that if you use 3 elements within your frame, it creates a more visually interesting and pleasing scene for your viewer. We just talked about how bringing 2 elements into your frame can create more interesting compositions, but actually 3 may be the perfect number of elements to bring into your photos to make the perfect composition. In this image I made in Mongolia, you can see that I focus my attention on the 3 horses grazing on the grasslands. The repetitive nature of the mirrored actions is enhanced because there are 3 subjects in the frame. Imagine if there were only 2 horses in this scene. Would it have had the same impact? If there were more horses, the frame may have been more busy and cluttered. So utilizing the power of 3 made the composition much more balanced and interesting for the viewer. Negative space is the empty space around your main subject matter in a photograph. How you use that empty space that surrounds your main subject matter often determines the power of your image and the power of the composition itself. In this image, you can see that the negative space is in the form of the dark, empty space at the bottom of the image and the relatively empty pink sky in the top third. The main subject matter is the horse walking across the ridgeline. By placing the horse on the line created by the classic rule of thirds, a balance is created between the dark space and the space of the sky. The negative space is balanced across the frame with the main subject. It takes practice to effectively use negative space, as it pushes you to become really observant about how the frame is balanced and how empty space plays a role in the overall feeling of a photo. If you find yourself in a situation where you have lots of action or many elements within the scene that you're photographing, you may want to consider filling the frame as the compositional technique that you choose for your photo. Filling the frame has the power to create a very dynamic photo where your viewer's attention is actually drawn around the frame, often with no one central point of focus. In this image I made of a burnt-out forest in Cambodia, you can see that I filled the frame with all the burnt limbs and tree trunks. I achieved this effect by using a telephoto lens, zooming in on the trees and filling the frame with the scene. There is no one central point of focus, but the repetitive nature of the lines, the similar tones of greys and blacks, and the depth of field all help draw you into the frame as a whole. Your view of the scene is completely filled, and that's what adds to the power of the photograph. Layering is a compositional technique where you add specific depth to your photograph by focusing on what's happening in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. With this technique, you're not just focusing on one element within the frame. You're looking and paying special and close attention to everything that's happening within the frame as a whole and how all the elements work together from foreground to background. In this image, you can see that there are 3 main layers within the photo. the flames from the fire in the foreground, the boy in the middle ground, and the general scene in the background. Each of these layers adds an element of interest for your viewer, both on a visual level and on a storytelling level. The layers add depth that heightens the complexity and interest of the photo, but they also give the viewer a chance to think about the relationship between the layers and what that means for the image and the story that you're trying to tell. Once you have mastered the single point of interest, 2 points of interest, and even 3 points of interest within your frame, then you can start to think about adding multiple points of interest across your frame to start to make really dynamic photographs. This technique is effective as it creates images that are much more visually appealing to your viewer, especially when you are able to balance the elements throughout the frame. We're not just adding elements for the sake of it. Like in this image of a boat coming to shore on a lake in Cambodia, each of the multiple points of interest in the frame are balanced with each other. They work together to create a visually interesting scene, creating interesting relationships between the elements that suggest something deeper and more meaningful about the scene. A simple way to focus your viewer's attention on something you want them to see within the frame is to use center focus and to put your main subject matter directly in the middle of the frame. By doing this, you're creating a natural balance and symmetry within the frame, which is naturally appealing to the viewer. In this image, you can see I place the main subject matter exactly in the center of the frame. By doing this, a natural balance is created and a symmetry is formed which adds to the impact of the frame. When using center focus, make sure to pay special attention to what is happening on either sides of the frame, often in the negative space. Make sure that there's nothing overly distracting that disrupts the balance of the photo and takes away from that center focus. Previously, we discussed the power of using strong shapes, as well as the power of using 3 elements within your frame. You can start to go one step further and actually start to combine these techniques to play around with more subtle effects within your composition that draw your viewer's attention into your frame. In this image, you can see that there are 3 elephants surrounding the man in the middle who's washing them. The power of the image comes from the subtle interplay between the 3 elephants and how they form an invisible triangle. It's this formation that forms the invisible framework that makes the image work. This compositional technique requires an acute awareness of how different elements are interacting with one another in the frame and what underlying shapes they form. In the same way that strong shapes, patterns, and symmetry appeal to the human eye, S-shaped curves also appeal in a similar way, and we can use that to our advantage in our photographs. Here you can see that the S-shaped curve is created by a mud bank in a wetland. There's a diminishing perspective aspect to the line, but the real interest lies in the bends of the line, as it draws the viewer's attention through the image in an almost hypnotic way. S-curves can be found in many different scenes, but especially so in nature in the form of rivers and streams which typically curve away from the perspective of the photographer. Get creative though, and look out for other ways in which you can incorporate S-curves into your images for stronger compositions. If you are new to using these composition techniques, take them one by one and go out and practice each of them until you feel comfortable using them in your photographs. Once you feel like you've mastered the technique, move on to the next one and keep practicing. After a while, after you've practiced these techniques enough, most of them will become ingrained in your mind and you won't even think about them when you're taking photos. You'll just start using them instinctively. If you've made it this far in the video, I'd like to invite you to join my online chat communities. I have one on WhatsApp and one on WeChat. And within these groups, members share their photos for feedback from other members and from myself. To join these communities, all you need to do is download my ebook, The Camera Doesn't Matter, from my website. At the end of the ebook, there are QR codes which you can scan and I'll add you to the communities. If you really want to take your photography to the next level though, consider joining my mentorship program. On the mentorship program, you'll get one-on-one video calls with me, and you'll also get the chance to join my online private community where we have monthly webinars, and it's a community that supports and encourages your photography's development. To learn more about the mentorship program, just click the link in the description below. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe and consider sharing with a friend. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.